Welcome to the Champions of Active Women podcast. In each episode, we share stories and experiences of active female role models and individuals who support the active pursuits of girls and women. Our goal is to encourage and inspire girls and women to be active for a lifetime, to reach their goals, and to break new barriers in sport and life. This podcast is brought to you by the Active Women's Health Initiative in the Sports Medicine Research Institute at the University of Kentucky. The mission of the Active Women's Health Initiative is to optimize health and promote physical activity and wellness for girls and women across the lifespan. If you enjoy this podcast, you can make a donation to the Active Women's Health Initiative at uky.networkforgood.com. Your contribution helps us empower all girls and women to find their inner athlete and become athletes for life. Lora Gralheer is currently an assistant coach with Center Women's Soccer and a technical director with Commonwealth Soccer Club. A native of Lexington, Kentucky, Lora played soccer at Center College in 2007 and 2008 before graduating in 2011. Lora has coached club soccer across the state of Kentucky for the past decade. In 2018, she was presented with a prestigious 30 Under 30 award by United Soccer Coaches. She has also been a member of the Kentucky Olympic Development Program staff for the past 9 years, including 2 years on the Midwest Regional ID Camp staff, as well as being named to the coaching staff for the 2017 Kentucky ODP International trip to the Netherlands. In 2019, she joined the leadership team for the United Soccer Coaches Women Coaches Advocacy Group and has helped oversee the creation of a quarterly newsletter, revamping of the group's social media pages, and the naming of the Coach of the Week recognition. In 2018, she earned her master's degree in sports administration with a focus in sports media and branding from Western Kentucky University. Hi, Lora. Welcome, and thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
So I'm excited to hear about your journey with sports and activity. So could you just kick it off and tell us a little bit about your journey in sports?
So I'm originally from Lexington, Kentucky. I've kind of coached soccer all over the state. I'm currently the assistant coach with the Center Women's Soccer team at Center College in Danville. I also work as a technical director with Commonwealth Soccer Club out of Lexington and do, I think like most coaches, a bunch of little side projects and jobs all over the place all the time. Grew up playing soccer, played into college, kind of hit a certain point where life and injuries and other things took soccer away in a sense. So I stopped playing after my sophomore year, ended up coaching locally in Danville and graduated and was like, I don't really know what I want to do. I guess I'll coach. I tutored student athletes at the University of Kentucky, got to use the chemistry degree somehow. And the more I coached, the more I loved it, and just have been really fortunate to kind of have doors open as I needed them to. So the last 7.5, 8 years, I've been in Louisville. I worked with Kentucky Fire Juniors and then helped take that club through the rebrand to now be Mockingbird Valley Premier. Coached a high school team up there, worked with Mercy Academy, and have continued to kind of work within the club game, within the Kentucky Olympic Development Program, and just have kind of gone with the flow of things. When a new job or a new door opens, explored it and seen what's up, and it somehow led me here.
Yeah, so what was it about soccer that drew you initially?
I think I just loved it when I started playing. I started playing at 5 or 6 in the little local rec leagues in Lexington and played through high school, played club in high school, did ODP stuff off and on. And it was always just the sport I came back to. So, I dabbled very briefly with like track and field, played basketball for a while. But I think like if you ever had to ask me to choose or there was ever a choice I had to make, I just always seemed to pick soccer.
Yeah, so soccer was the thing, maybe a few other things dabbled in there, but primarily soccer, it sounds like.
Yeah, that's the one that always won.
So, were there supporters in your family or coaches? Who were some of the people who really helped bring you along in that journey with soccer?
My mom has to get a lot of credit. She got me to and from everything all the time and made it work. I probably to this day still can't figure out how she managed the logistics as mostly a single parent, figuring out stuff between my sister and I and getting me all over the place. Fortunate to have kind of coaches that popped in and out that were good and some not so good. Great teammates, great friends. A lot of it for me was just, that's how I wanted to relax at the end of the day. It was fun for me to be on a soccer field. And that was my kind of moment of zen to get away from it. Also, was something I look forward to. I played for Mike Fulton for 4 years or 3.5 years with club soccer, with Lexington FC. And then he's now a coach that I technically oversee within Commonwealth. So it's kind of a weird full circle journey in all of it. But it's been cool to be able to see some of those people that kind of helped get me to here, and now me working with them on more of a peer-to-peer level. So I think it was just something for me that was always fun and was always that like breath of fresh air at the end of a tough day, no matter what else I had going on.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about, as you've transitioned into coaching, what your philosophy is with coaching. I know you're working with many youth athletes, and now, you're working to guide some of the coaching as well. So tell me about your philosophy.
I think one of the things that I always come back to is that any kid I will work with, I want them to sign up next year. And if they come back, I've done my job, because I've had really great, high level, super talented, focused, this is what they want to do athletes. And then I've had kids that say, this is something I love and I enjoy and I want to be here. And we're not probably going to win all of our games. But I think at the end of the day, you've done your job as a coach if they want to come back and they want to stay in the sport. And I think especially for young women, and not to exclude young men, it's equally important for them. I work more on the women's side. It's great for them to have that outlet and that level of connectivity and something to keep them involved and engaged. I think the biggest one that I saw it in was within the high school setting. We weren't great. We finished my last year as the regional champs, which was like a big win for us. We finally got back to like competing in the state tournament, but there were a lot of players there that it needed to be fun first. So there's a lot of, technical, tactical, and all of this stuff that you can put into it. But I think at the end of the day, for me, if a kid wants to come back and it's something that they say, I looked forward to that, I've done my job.
I love that perspective. And again, I don't want to make this all just about girls, but we do see that girls drop out of sports at higher rates than boys and earlier than boys. And so I think that perspective is a good one, especially because of the numbers we see in sports for girls versus boys.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, we started chatting a little bit before the formal interview about watching some of your athletes transition from club level to now coaching some of them at center, in that collegiate level play. What do you see as keeping athletes, coming back every year, like you said, but also keeping them on that successful trajectory, whatever that means for them?
Yeah. I think for a lot of them, it's understanding what that trajectory actually is. So Center's a D3 school. We absolutely have players that could have played at a D2 or a D1 school, but they understood that their trajectory led them to a place like Center, where the soccer is going to be really competitive. The academics are going to be fantastic. There's a lot of other things that they can be involved in, whether it's Greek life or student council or whatever they needed it to be. I think the ones that are the most successful understand what they want to get out of it. I've seen a lot of players that are very talented that feel as if I have to go play D1. I have to go do these big things and be on this team and be on that team. And all the weight of this expectations kind of takes some of the joy away. So I think the ones that I've seen stick with it the longest, the ones that I've seen enjoy it the longest, whether they end up playing in college or not, that feel like they got what they wanted to out of the game, understand why they're in it. And for some of them, they're like, this is just social for me. I love it. I'm going to play through high school. I have no interest in playing in college. And I love those kids because they get it. They know why they're doing it. And that's really what makes them fun to work with and probably makes the game a little bit more fun for them as well.
Yeah, I love that perspective, just kind of like setting realistic goals, and thinking really about why it's meaningful to you personally. I love that. So who are your coaching mentors as you have developed as a coach? Who are your coaching mentors?
Probably one of the ones that I've worked most heavily with over the past 5-6 years about my time in Louisville is Mike Dickey. His resume is longer than I could even pretend to summarize. But to hit the highlights, the guy is coached through the youth national teams and at the national team level within the US, within Asia, worked with the Jordan women's national team, has worked with the Indian Federation. He's done a lot of really cool things in soccer. but he also coaches a 2006 girls team in Louisville and will come run sessions for 10-year-olds. And he's been someone that I value his opinion and I value his leadership style a lot. So in getting the opportunity with Commonwealth to step into the role as a technical director, that's what he was to me in Louisville. And I called him and I said, I don't think I'm ready for this job unless I'm able to watch how you lead, because he's exceedingly inclusive. He doesn't talk down to people. Like, this is a guy that could play the cards and name drop anytime he wants to, but he's very good at understanding and meeting people where they are. So I value his guidance and his leadership a lot. Through the Women's Coaches Advocacy Group, I've met a probably laundry list of female coaches that I follow and listen and learn from. So getting the opportunity to sit down and talk with Haley Carter and Lisa Cole about what it means to be within that organization, working through some different mentorship stuff with different organizations through kind of out my coaching career, working with Derek Willis here in Kentucky, who is one of my like sounding boards when I've had a hard day, that he helps, on that end. So I think I've been fortunate to be surrounded by really cool people, and I've been very pleased to learn how open the soccer community is to answering questions if you're willing to ask them.
I was just thinking that, I mean, it sounds like a great network that you've surrounded yourself with, and they have to be willing to open up and
Yeah,
share their
absolutely.
experiences. So in what ways are you still working to grow and learn as a coach? You mentioned a few of them there, but are there others you'd like to highlight?
I am in the midst of the US Soccer B license. So that is definitely a point of growth. I think anytime you step into one of those more formal learning environments, you're challenged as a coach to kind of understand why and how you do things. And then there are times where you're going to have to learn a new way to do things. And I think that's equally important. So am I probably going to use 100% of the stuff that we do in that course? Maybe, maybe not, but is it going to force me to really realize why I do some of the things the way I do, maybe in a different way? I think that's great. So that for me, very recently, we'll probably go back to working on some B license stuff when we get off this call. Has been a big point of growth within my formal coaching education. But stepping from like the youth game to the college game, I've had to learn a lot about recruiting. So I think, the head coach at center, Jay Hoffman, he's been great at kind of guiding me in some of that stuff and learning that piece of what it is to be a coach at the collegiate level as well.
So for anyone in our audience who is not a coach or not well versed in soccer, what kind of requirements or education, what does that B license look like?
So I guess if you like line up US soccer with maybe a general education standpoint, I would kind of compare like getting your D license to getting like a high school diploma. Most of your coaches at a youth level within the state are required to have that to coach an 11v11 team. So you're going to see that a lot. The next step up is like kind of getting a bachelor's degree. So you've gotten your C license, you've invested more time in it. It doesn't necessarily change the level of access that you have to things, but it just shows that next level investment. B license would kind of be like a master's degree. A license would kind of be like a doctorate. And if you work within a pro environment, there's a pro license that's higher than that. But as a club and a college coach, the pro license isn't something I'm factoring into things right now. So it's definitely one of those ones where you've put the time in and you've put the work in. There's still that A license above it, but I think you kind of see the number of coaches within each pocket dwindle down as you go because of the amount of time and investment it takes.
Thank you for that education metaphor. That helps me to understand it, and I think our audience as well.
It makes a lot more sense that way, hopefully.
Yeah. So, one of the things our Active Women's Health Initiative is really interested in promoting lifelong health and wellness. And I think sports can be the beginning of that. But I'm wondering what you think about how sports can help youth athletes transition to a lifetime of activity.
I think a lot of sports or hobbies outside of athletics just teach you good habits. And I think it teaches you the value of putting the work in to see the result at the end. Like sports, it's very tangible. You put X amount of practice time in and you see your level of play, your fitness, your understanding of the game improve. So I think there are probably a lot of things in life where maybe you don't get that very in your face type feedback. But I think it teaches you a lot of that process of understanding that sometimes things are hard. You can learn a lot from a loss, which isn't always fun, but I think that there's just a lot of life lessons that you can learn by going through that process, especially if you're someone that's been in athletics for multiple years. You'll probably have some good years that you'll learn about how great those successful moments feel. You'll probably have a year or two that's not that great, and you'll learn a lot about how you handle those things personally, how you handle those things within a group. So I think it's just one of those that, if we can teach young people good habits and how to deal with emotions in the context of the good and the bad and the ugly, then we've helped them maybe learn a little bit more about themselves without having to sit in a classroom and explain to them the psychology or this or that, because they probably know it, they just maybe don't have the words to explain it sometimes.
Mm-hmm. So you've mentioned being the technical director for Commonwealth Soccer Club
Mhm.
a couple times. Could you tell our audience what that is and what your role looks like there?
Yeah, so we have two technical directors, myself and Paul Baba, who works with the UK women's soccer team. So he kind of has the younger kids. I have the older kids. I think when you think about a technical director, they're kind of like the coach of the coaches. So our job is to help make sure that our coaching staff has the support they need to be great at their jobs. So sometimes it's providing educational pieces where we'll come in and say, hey, here's a couple sessions that you might want to run. Hey, here's some topics we think that need to be covered for our teams to continue to develop. Sometimes it's being their voice in, a board meeting or something to that extent, where they come and they say, hey, I think we can do this as a club to be better. How can we make this a possibility? So I guess that's, there's the obvious technical component of soccer with the tactics and the different formations and the movement and this and that. And depending on the club that you're in, there might be a very strict technical plan where we're all going to play this way in this style. I think a great thing about Commonwealth is that we're going to have threads within our teams that we're going to ask them to, be able to accomplish a certain set of skills. We also understand that some of them aren't going to be ready for that. So finding ways to work alongside the coaches to help them get the most out of what they can for their players.
Sounds like a very dynamic role where you could be asked to do all kinds of things on any given
Yes.
day.
I think most jobs in sports tend to have that piece to it where your job is your job until they need you for something else, then that's part of your job too.
Yep, just add it to the list, right?
Exactly.
So you mentioned earlier that you're active with the United Soccer Coaches Women Coaches Advocacy Group. Wow, that's a
Mhm.
mouthful. And so can you talk about the goals of this group and how you got involved?
Yeah. So I was really fortunate to be named to the 30 under 30 class, I think in 2018, through United Soccer Coaches that recognizes kind of young up and coming coaches in the game. And through that, you start to meet people within the organization. So kind of circling back again to Mike Dickey, he made it a point of introducing me to Haley Carter, who's the current chair, and said, Lora writes our club newsletter. You should get her to write a newsletter for the women's advocacy group. So I get this phone call from Haley Carter that's like, hi, we want you to write a newsletter. And I have heard of her, knew who she was. Again, exceedingly impressive woman in all that she's done both on and off the field. So at first I was like, I don't know if you need to call me for this, but okay.
But yes, please, I'll do
Sure,
it.
sure, we'll try this. If I can write a newsletter for a club and you like that, then I'll help you write one. So that's kind of how I got my foot in the door, is I help write a quarterly newsletter. We'll put one out. It's the 21st today. Sometime in the next couple days, it'll come out for this next quarter. I help with the social media stuff, just some really basic graphics for us to recognize coaches or celebrate, Pride Month, African American History Month, like you name it, just for different ways for us to recognize coaches. And I think that's a lot of the goal of the advocacy group. So not say things for you. We want to give you a platform to share your story or what soccer means to you or what your journey through soccer has been or what your journey through coaching and motherhood has been, and just giving people that platform and that opportunity to share what they do and why they love it. Because I think there are so many different types of people and types of pathways that get people to where they are today.
Mm-hmm. So, I think along those lines, women have seen sports become a much more welcoming place over the past decades
Mhm.
or so. But what challenges do you still see for women, whether it's in sports, whether it's in coaching or as athletes? What challenges do you see?
Um, I think it's definitely gotten better. I don't know if I would have had some of the opportunities that I've had now 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So a lot of credit has to be given to those that came before me and helped and keep pulling people along with them. I think that that's a big piece of moving it forward, are those women that have kind of blazed a trail and been the first one to take this job or been the first one to fill this role, and the ability that they have to then pull back and like reach back and pull somebody else along with them.
Hmm.
So I think you see that a lot, especially within soccer, where you'll see a female coach hire another female assistant, bring on a graduate assistant that's a former player. So I think that cycle of things is great. But I think I'm going to hold the male coaches and the male board staff to hiring women a little bit more to allow them to do that. Because I think once you get that seat at the table, it opens up the conversation to more females. You know, you're always going to talk about the people that you know. And if you know 2 female coaches, that's great. But that female coach might know 30 female coaches. So how do we get more females in the room making those decisions so the circle of candidates expands to include a little bit more of everybody?
Hmm.
And I think, you know, you see it with different groups and different organizations that have done a better job of putting a woman on the board, putting a woman in a position of power where she's included in those conversations. But I think that's a lot of it. You hire who you know. And if you can get women in the room discussing other women that they know, it's just as valuable as having very qualified and articulate and well thought out male coaches that know a bunch of other male coaches. So just creating that equal opportunity for people to discuss the most broad pool of candidates, I think, is a great step forward.
Yeah, and I think you gave some great examples today of men who made introductions for you
Mhm.
and kind of reached their
Absolutely.
hand back too. So I think that's a great point, that it's not just about what can women do for each other, but what can we all do together.
For sure.
So, what advice do you have for women who want to get into coaching?
Show up. I think a lot of the jobs and the opportunities I got is because I put soccer first, and maybe almost to a fault at times. Um, but they can't hire you if you're not there. They can't promote you if you're not around. You know, it's easy to just say, well, she just coaches this team, so that's it. So I kind of probably made myself annoying. And I was constantly there. Hey, you have a session, can I come help? Hey, you have this, can I come be a part of that? So invite yourself, and then when you're there, you know, do what you know how to do. So trust yourself in that, you know, if you're there, it's for a reason. Do what you know how to do, and don't be afraid to ask questions. But I think the biggest thing that's helped me is just a willingness to be there. And then when you're the one that's dependable and now, well, she's already been here, we'll give her this next one. So I think that's a big part of it, which is hard. Time is hard to find. But I think it's, if that's something that's a priority to you, you have to find a way to show it in the time that you invest in it as well.
Yeah, and I know the coaching world is busy. I mean, even if you're just coaching one team, it's
Mhm.
busy and hectic, with sometimes very odd hours and weekends and nights
Yeah,
and all the things, you know. So, um, how do you keep yourself balanced, healthy, well in the midst of all that?
that's probably an area of growth that I'm going to have to continue to work on. I think I finally feel as if I've hit a place in my career where I can afford to say no. Like I think the first 4 or 5, 6 years, like working into that first full-time coaching job, I felt like I just needed to keep saying yes so that there
Mhm.
was never a question of, is she in this? Is she invested? It's like, yeah, I'm here. When's the next one? Perfect. I'm going to be there. So I've hit the point now where I can look at something and say, I don't, I don't know if I do that. Like I think I'm okay not doing this extra thing. And kind of managing my workload a little bit better. Definitely coaching a college team, working on your B license, moving. Don't know if I did a great job of that this fall. Um, but I think that's something that I have to continue to find ways to do. You know, I like to read fiction books that have no thought necessary. So finding an hour, bringing that on the bus and like putting my stuff away and just saying, I'm going to read this book. And when I fall asleep, I'm going to let myself take a nap. You know, finding those little moments where I can kind of step away from it and try my best to not feel guilty about not doing something else. I think that's probably a big current learning point that I'm working at being better at as well.
Mhm. something we can all certainly work on. So we've covered a lot of ground today.
Mhm.
Are there one or two things that you hope our audience learns from this conversation or takes away?
Um, I think for me, something I've learned a lot with coaching and then a lot with working with players is that if you understand your why, you'll get a lot further with things. Doing things to do them or doing things because you're expected to do them or you've been told this is the next step, eventually people can't tell you the next step. But if you know why you're doing it and why you chose to invest in it, whether you're a player or a parent or a coach or an assistant coach or a volunteer, if you know your why, you know what comes next because it either fits your why or it doesn't. So I think that's something that I've balanced a lot throughout some different job transitions over the past couple of years. Um, I think the other one just is the same. You know, if it's something that's valuable to you, you show up and you put the time in. And it's a lot of kind of grindy, long days. And, you know, I'm not going to go hang out with my friends and go to dinner because I can grab an extra session and do this. But also understanding that there are probably times that you need to just go have dinner with your friends too. And maybe I could have been a little bit better about that. And probably should be a little bit better about that now. But I think those are a couple of things that have both helped me and taught me something along the way too.
Great. Is there anything else you'd like our audience to know?
No, I'm excited to join. It was nice to chat. I'll take a little break from things and then I'll hop back into work and knock out some B-license stuff before center trains this afternoon.
Awesome. Well, good luck with that license. And I appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Champions of Active Women podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the Active Women's Health Initiative and the Sports Medicine Research Institute within the College of Health Sciences at the University of Kentucky. This episode was produced by the Faculty Media Depot. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share with your social networks, or simply tell a friend about us. If you want to help us sustain the Champions of Active Women podcast, donate to the Active Women's Health Initiative at uky.networkforgood.com. For up-to-date information about our initiative, follow us on social media at UKAWHI. Thank you for joining us as we empower all girls and women to become athletes for life.